He was calm, composed, pulled over on a quiet Georgia highway. But when a deputy cuffed him for looking suspicious, she had no idea who she'd just put in the back of her cruiser. A 3-star general, a man with direct access to the Pentagon, and a lesson in dignity that would shake the country. This isn't a story about rage. It's about restraint, about power that whispers instead of shouts. And the moment justice arrived, quiet, deliberate, unstoppable. Watch to the end for the message that stayed with millions. The long stretch of Georgia highway shimmered under the midday sun, its surface cracked from years of heat and history. Brigadier General Malcolm Stokes had driven this road between Fort Ransom and Augusta more times than he could count. He knew every curve, every faded mile marker, and the rhythm of the trees swaying in slow motion on either side. But today, something was off. His military-issued GPS had frozen mid-route after a recent update. Typical. Malcolm pulled onto a gravel shoulder just past an old wooden sign that read, Jasper County, established 1854. He parked, tapped his encrypted phone screen, and tried to reset the app. The vehicle was unassuming. An old gray sedan with federal tags, windows tinted within legal limits. His uniform jacket, neatly folded with rank insignia visible only if you looked close, lay on the back seat. He wasn't in formal dress, just slacks and a crisp polo shirt. He barely noticed the crunch of tires behind him until it was too late. A sheriff's cruiser eased up beside his car, lights flashing but no siren. The door opened with a loud creak, and a tall white officer in mirrored sunglasses stepped out. The sun caught her badge, Deputy Rena Calloway. Her posture was all command, no curiosity. Without greeting, she marched up to Malcolm's window and tapped hard. Twice. Roll it down. Malcolm obeyed, lowering the window halfway. License and registration. He glanced at her, steady, calm. Afternoon, Deputy. I pulled over to reset my GPS. It froze. Where are you headed? She asked, eyes scanning his face, then darting past him into the car. Fort Ransom. Work-related. Her hand moved subtly toward the holster at her hip. You're parked on private land. This area is known for dumping, trespassing. You match the profile. What profile? He asked, voice low. She didn't answer. Instead, she took a half step back. I'm gonna need you to step out of the vehicle. For checking my GPS? You're on private property, she snapped, and you're not answering questions. Malcolm sighed inwardly, unbuckling his seatbelt with slow, practiced movements. I'll step out, but I'd like to state clearly that I haven't broken any law. Calloway didn't reply. As he stepped out, she ordered him to place his hands on the hood. I'd like to retrieve my ID from inside the vehicle, Malcolm said, calmly. Hands on the hood. He complied, laying his palms against the warm metal. She kicked his feet apart roughly. No backup, no body cam. She didn't even ask what he did for a living. I'm a federal officer, he said evenly. I'd like permission to retrieve my credentials. You're being difficult. No, ma'am. I'm being clear. Behind them, a pickup truck slowed. The passenger rolled down a window just enough to raise her phone. A teenager in the back seat already had his camera rolling. Deputy Calloway didn't notice. Put your hands behind your back. Malcolm didn't move. Deputy, I'm Brigadier General Malcolm Stokes, United States Army. My ID is in my briefcase inside the car. She scoffed. You expect me to believe that? You don't need to believe it, he said. You just need to verify. She stepped toward him, ignoring the growing crowd now forming behind their vehicles. Then she yanked his wallet from his pocket, flipping through it like she was sifting through a deck of lies, until she stopped cold. Her eyes landed on a level 4 Pentagon-issued clearance card. Her jaw twitched. She stepped back, but not far enough to look like she'd made a mistake. You could have said that sooner. I did. She muttered something under her breath. You still can't park here. I didn't. I pulled over. People were watching, phones were rolling. Still, she reached for the cuffs. Turn around. Malcolm stayed still. I'm not resisting, he said evenly, but I will ask that you call your supervisor. You don't get to make requests. He looked at the teenager filming. The kid's hands didn't shake. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was a message. "I'm not a threat," Malcolm said. "That's not your call," she replied, and snapped the cuffs onto his wrists. The metal bit into his skin. And just like that, the weight of 3 decades of service, sacrifice, and strategy disappeared behind a label. One she chose for him. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have imagined, was that this wasn't the kind of man who stayed silent. It was only the beginning. The cruiser's backseat was cramped, the vinyl worn, smelling faintly of sun-baked leather and old coffee. General Malcolm Stokes sat silently, hands cuffed behind his back, wrists already sore from the tension in the metal. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was calculating. Outside, Deputy Calloway paced, radio pressed to her mouth as she tried to spin the situation into something manageable. But her voice betrayed her. The clipped words, the rising pitch, the stutter when dispatch asked for clarification. She hadn't called in backup until after the cuffs were on. That alone would raise flags. A soft knock came at the window. It wasn't her. Deputy Lamar Boyd, older, calm, with a salt and pepper beard and a heavy build, opened the door gently. "Sir?" he said, nodding once. "May I have your name?" "Brigadier General Malcolm Stokes, United States Army. My ID is in my briefcase, back seat." Deputy Calloway had it in her hands. Boyd didn't blink. "Understood. Is there anyone you'd like to contact?" Malcolm nodded. "Yes, one number. You'll want to let me make that call." Without hesitation, Boyd pulled out his own phone, thumbed in the passcode, and handed it over. Malcolm turned slightly, awkwardly, cuffs still on. His fingers moved with precision, dialing a secure line he'd used only 3 times in his life. It rang once, twice. A clipped voice answered. "Major Wynn, Department of Defense Liaison Office. This is General Malcolm Stokes. I am currently in custody in Jasper County, Georgia. Unlawfully detained. I require verification sent immediately." A pause. The tone shifted instantly. "General Stokes, are you secure?" "For now. No injuries. Civilian witnesses present. Officer failed to identify protocol or check credentials. We're tracking now. Do not disconnect." Another click. A deeper voice replaced the first. "General Stokes, this is Commander Reese, Military Police and Pentagon Liaison Team en route. Confirm location." Malcolm provided coordinates, then added quietly, "Phones are out. Civilians are filming. This will not stay quiet." "Understood, sir. Maintain current position. Help is on the way." The call ended. Malcolm handed the phone back to Boyd. Outside, Calloway was still pacing, shouting into her own radio, unaware that within the next 10 minutes, her name would be on a call log at the Department of Defense. And then came the rumble. Not of cruisers, not of sirens, but the low, unmistakable growl of black SUVs, unmarked, moving in sync, tires crunching gravel like the ground itself was shifting. 3 vehicles in total, no logos, no lights, just presence. They parked with surgical precision, one ahead of Calloway's cruiser, one behind, and the third just off the shoulder. Doors opened. 2 men in black suits stepped out first, earpieces in place, posture like stone, and then, from the lead vehicle, came Colonel Errol Gaines. Decorated, commanding, silent as he moved forward like a blade through soft air. He didn't look at Calloway. Not yet. He went straight to the cruiser. Opened the door himself. "General Stokes," he said with quiet gravity. "Are you all right?" Malcolm nodded. "Aside from the cuffs, fine. Let's get those off." Colonel Gaines turned, snapping his fingers toward Deputy Boyd, who stepped forward, key in hand. Calloway finally noticed. "What is going on here?" she barked, walking toward them, hands twitching at her belt. Colonel Gaines turned slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time. "Do you know who you just cuffed and stuffed in the back of your car?" He refused to comply. He didn't identify. He gave you his name, his rank, and you held a federal ID in your hand, a brigadier general in the United States Army. She opened her mouth, floundering. "I thought." "You didn't think," Gaines snapped, his voice finally hard. "You profiled, you disrespected, and you detained without cause." Calloway's skin flushed red, but she stayed rooted in place. "Where's your supervisor?" Gaines asked. Boyd raised a hand. "Sheriff Nix is on his way." "Good, he'll want to be here for this." Malcolm stepped out slowly, stretching his arms as the cuffs came off. Red marks bloomed on his wrists, but he didn't wince. Phones were still recording. The crowd had grown. Colonel Gaines turned back to Malcolm. "Would you like to press charges?" Malcolm looked past them, at the teenager with the camera, at the woman in the passenger seat of the truck, at the quiet man standing with folded arms beside his son. "Not yet," he said. "Let the cameras speak first." He picked up his jacket from the back seat, pulled it on, and straightened the collar. The stars gleamed in the sun. Deputy Calloway took a half step back. And that was when the power in the situation shifted. For good. The crunch of gravel gave way to a heavier sound, a truck engine idling low, then easing to a halt. A dust cloud trailed behind the sheriff's department pickup, its hood sun-bleached, American flag decal flapping slightly above the antenna. Sheriff Ellis McCrae stepped out slowly. Tall, broad-shouldered, 63 years old and carved from South Georgia pine, with a limp he didn't talk about and a glare that had silenced many a bar fight. He wore his hat low, sunglasses perched above the brim. And today, for the first time in his 37-year career, he looked unsure of where to place his authority. Colonel Gaines turned and met him halfway. Behind them, cameras still rolled. Deputy Calloway stood to the side now, arms crossed, fists clenched tight under the pressure of her own undoing. "Sheriff," Gaines said with a clipped nod. "Colonel Errol Gaines, Department of the Army. Your deputy detained a U.S. Army general, without cause." McCrae squinted, looking past him toward the man in the crisp military jacket, the stars on his collar gleaming. "You the one in cuffs?" he asked plainly. Malcolm stepped forward. "Brigadier General Malcolm Stokes." "Yes, sir, I was." McCrae turned to Calloway. "Tracy, you want to explain what the hell's going on?" Calloway stiffened. "He was pulled over on private land. Didn't comply. I suspected illegal dumping. He fit the profile." "What profile?" McCrae asked sharply. Calloway hesitated. "He didn't identify himself at first." "That true?" McCrae turned back to Malcolm. "I told her I was a federal officer," Malcolm replied. "Asked to retrieve my credentials. She refused. Then she cuffed me." The air was thick again, not with heat this time, but with consequence. McCrae sighed, his jaw tight. "Tracy, did you check his ID?" Yes, but it looked off," McCrae echoed. "Or just didn't fit what you thought you'd see?" Calloway opened her mouth, then shut it again. Her shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "Sheriff," Malcolm said, his voice calm but strong, "I'm not here to ruin a career, but this incident can't be swept away. Not when it was witnessed, not when it was recorded. I want proper channels. I want accountability, nothing more." McCrae nodded once. "Understood." He stepped closer to Calloway and extended his hand. "Badge, gun." "Sir, now." Reluctantly, she reached for the badge pinned to her chest and placed it in his palm. Then the sidearm. Her hands were shaking. "You're on administrative leave until further notice," McCrae said, loud enough for the cameras to hear. "This matter will be reviewed by the DA and state oversight. You will not return to duty until cleared." Calloway said nothing. She didn't look at anyone. Not Malcolm, not Gaines, not even the cameras. Colonel Gaines turned to McCrae. "Thank you, Sheriff. This could have gone differently." McCrae sighed. "I wish it had." He looked at the crowd now, which had doubled in size. There were no chants, no chaos, just silence and eyes. Dozens of them, fixed on one moment of correction long overdue. He cleared his throat. "Folks," he said, addressing the onlookers, "I don't care what uniform a person's wearing. Nobody deserves to be treated like they're less than human. That's not law enforcement. That's ego in a badge." There were nods from the crowd. One man, the same father from earlier, crossed his arms and muttered, "About time." Malcolm stepped forward again. "Sheriff, I appreciate your response, but let me be clear. This isn't about me. It's about what she did when she thought I was just another nameless black man pulled over on a back road. McCrae met his gaze. Understood, General. Colonel Gaines clapped a hand on Malcolm's shoulder. We'll initiate a formal complaint, but we'll also let the video do its job. Because the video by now had already hit social media. And somewhere, back at a gas station down the road, a teenager named Jeremiah was uploading raw footage to TikTok with the caption, "This cop thought she could disrespect a black man, then found out who he really was." The ripple was already spreading, and Malcolm Stokes, standing steady under Georgia's sun, knew the storm was just beginning. By the time General Malcolm Stokes returned to his temporary quarters near Fort Benning that evening, the storm had already begun to swirl. He didn't even make it to his front door before his phone buzzed. Once, twice, then relentlessly. First, it was a missed call from his wife, then 4 texts from fellow officers, and then a string of unfamiliar numbers flooding his inbox. The first viral clip came from Jeremiah, the teenager who had recorded everything. He'd stitched together 3 short videos, the officer's aggressive commands, the moment Malcolm calmly identified himself, and the arrival of the black SUVs. The caption was simple. "This ain't just a traffic stop. This is what injustice looks like until it gets corrected." By morning, the clip had over 3.4 million views on TikTok alone. Twitter threads unpacked every detail, zooming in on the Pentagon badge, the red marks on Malcolm's wrists, the stillness in his posture as the officer barked commands. The hashtags trended by sunrise. Tac General Stokes, pulled over while black, justice in Ellaville. CNN ran the story by noon. NBC followed. Then the Washington Post. Headlines framed the narrative clearly. Decorated general detained by rural deputy in racially charged encounter. And the subheadings weren't gentle. Footage shows calm defiance, officers' failure to follow protocol. Calls for accountability rang louder than any siren. And the story didn't cumbered fling. But the story didn't end at the moment Malcolm was released. In fact, that was just the trigger. Over the next 48 hours, investigative journalists dug into Deputy Tracy Calloway's record. What surfaced was damning. 3 prior complaints of racial profiling. 2 dismissed, 1 still open. A 2019 traffic stop involving a Hispanic teenager that had eerily similar language. Resisting, uncooperative, matched a profile. And a leaked body cam freeze frame from 2021 showing Calloway pointing her weapon at a man seated in his car, with hands clearly on the wheel. None of these had led to disciplinary action. Until now. The sheriff's department was swarmed with media inquiries. Sheriff McCrae issued a statement that felt like too little, too late. "We are reviewing all prior incidents involving Deputy Calloway. We take these matters seriously and will proceed accordingly." But the people didn't want proceeding. They wanted answers and consequences. In Ellaville, a town of 1,700, the story became the only thing people talked about. In barbershops, churches, diners, at football practices and PTA meetings. At the local high school, a history teacher printed out a still from the video, Malcolm standing in handcuffs flanked by officers, and taped it to the board beneath a banner that read, "Discuss. What does authority mean and who decides how it's used?" Students didn't just discuss, they argued, passionately, respectfully. They asked hard questions about power, appearance, assumption, some for the first time. In Atlanta, State Senator Alicia Moore called for an independent review of rural law enforcement protocols. On MSNBC, a panel of military veterans, black, Latino, white, shared their own stories of being stopped and disrespected while out of uniform. "This isn't rare," one of them said. "This is just the time the wrong cop picked the wrong one." As for Malcolm, he said nothing publicly. No press conference, no interviews, no viral tweet. His only public statement came in a short post on the Department of Defense's website. "I am grateful for the support I've received. My priority remains the integrity of our armed forces and the values we are sworn to uphold: honor, duty, respect. I hope we all reflect on what those words should mean, even when no one's looking. But people were looking. The restraint in his silence somehow made the story louder and more potent. On the third day, the governor of Georgia weighed in during a press briefing. "We all saw what happened," he said, avoiding Malcolm's name but not the issue. "No one wearing a uniform, military or civilian, should be judged before they speak." A reporter fired back, "What about those who aren't in uniform?" The governor blinked, then he pivoted. "We're reviewing training mandates statewide." But it was too late to contain, because the real conversation had already escaped into homes, barbershops, comment sections. And it wasn't about military rank anymore. It was about being black and presumed guilty until you could prove otherwise. Even with 30 years of service behind you, even with stars stitched to your shoulder. Malcolm sat alone in his office that night, watching the sunset slip behind the trees outside Fort Benning. His jacket lay folded across a chair, his rank visible even in the fading light. He wasn't angry, he was focused, because he knew the hardest part wasn't going viral. The hardest part was what came after. The auditorium was modest. No grand stadium seating, no ornate stage design. Just folding chairs lined in clean rows and a plain wooden podium standing under the warm lights of the Georgia State Leadership Forum in Tallahassee. It wasn't packed with generals or government officials. It was filled with teachers, EMTs, small business owners, youth pastors, local council members, everyday Americans who made up the fabric of communities like Ellaville. General Malcolm Stokes stood backstage, adjusting the cuffs of his dark blue suit. No medals, no ribbons, no stars. He wasn't here as a symbol of rank. He was here as a man who had been humiliated and had chosen not to return it in kind. When he stepped forward, when he stepped into the light, the audience didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The quiet that fell over the room said more than applause ever could. He paused, looked around, and began. "I want to talk about restraint." His voice was calm, sure, grounded, like it always had been. Not silence, not passivity, but restraint, the kind that requires real strength. He let that linger before continuing. Because when you're wronged, when you're humiliated, everything in you wants to hit back. It's human, but power isn't measured by how hard you hit. It's measured by how much you choose not to. People shifted in their seats, not from boredom, but reflection. You can't always control how people see you, but you can control how you respond when they get it wrong. And that choice is where real power lives. Later in the Q&A, a young woman stood, an EMT in training. "Sir," she asked, "how did you stay so calm that day?" Malcolm gave her a soft smile. "Because my life was in that moment. It was in everything that came before it." He paused. She didn't know my story, but I did, and I refused to let her rewrite it. In the weeks that followed, the Department of Justice officially launched a civil rights review of Schley County's law enforcement practices. The governor of Georgia issued an executive order mandating implicit bias training for all state law enforcement agencies. It wasn't just about Officer Calloway anymore. It was about the system that protected her until it couldn't. Sheriff McRae stepped down quietly a month later, citing personal health reasons. But insiders knew the pressure had grown too loud to ignore. Meanwhile, Malcolm refused every major network interview. He wasn't interested in becoming a media figure, but he did accept a request from a civics teacher in Macon to speak to her class of high school seniors, and another from a local church in Albany, and a podcast hosted by two Black veterans trying to build better leadership programs for underserved youth. He didn't talk about racism directly in every session. Instead, he talked about presence. poise, and how you can walk into a room and make people think harder just by standing still. 1 month after the incident, Deputy Calloway was officially dismissed, her appeal denied, after video evidence, eyewitness statements, and disciplinary history were reviewed in full. There was no press conference. She moved to another county, applied for a job in private security, and faded from public view. But the conversation she sparked did not. Jeremiah, the teen who recorded the video, launched a YouTube channel called Watchful Voices, a platform where he interviewed veterans, civic leaders, and everyday people about justice, courage, and the moments where standing still can change everything. His first video? A 3-minute reflection titled, "I didn't know who he was, but I knew what was wrong." It hit 500,000 views in the first week. At Fort Benning, Malcolm stood before a new class of Army cadets. They were sharp, ready, full of questions. He didn't open with war stories. He opened with this: "Wearing this uniform will earn you some respect, but it won't protect you from everything. One day, someone may see your skin before your stars. Someone may decide what you are before you say a single word. When that day comes, don't flinch, don't rage, stand tall, be calm, let the truth do the work. Because sometimes, the world doesn't need another warrior. It needs a witness." That evening, Malcolm sat on his back porch, a mug of tea in one hand, the Georgia breeze stirring faintly. The sun dipped behind the pine trees in ribbons of gold and lavender. He wasn't proud. He wasn't angry. He was simply centered, because he knew the power he carried wasn't in his rank. It was in the way he chose to wear it. With dignity, with decency, and with a refusal to shrink himself, no matter who thought they could make him small. What is the lesson of this story? 1. Restraint is not weakness. It's a conscious choice to stay grounded when everything inside you wants to fight. That takes real strength. 2. You don't have to shout to be powerful. Sometimes your calm presence in the middle of injustice is louder than any protest. 3. Knowing who you are is your greatest armor. When others try to define you, hold tight to your truth, because that's where your power lives. 4. Real leadership shows up when no one is watching. But when the world does see, make sure what they see reflects your values. 5. Change starts not just with outrage, but with clarity. What you model in the hardest moments can transform how others see the world. What do you think about this story? Let's comment below to discuss. And don't forget to subscribe our channel to listen to more interesting stories.